he's decided to do this, and in return could blow up his career.
Deshaun will not be traded to the Miami Dolphins, and it's because he refused to settle any of the outstanding civil cases currently against him. And it now sets up a timeline. Once the NFL trade deadline passes in about 35 minutes from now, it sets up a timeline where he likely will not be traded until after the month of May of next year because of the ongoing legal situation in both the civil and criminal courts. And that's ultimately the issue for Miami. Everything was approved except for the fact that Deshaun Watson would not settle these cases, therefore leaving open the possibility of a massive suspension in 2022.
What are the ramifications for the Texans from a salary cap standpoint now that they're going into a draft with this timeline where they can't trade him away before that draft? It's been an awkward situation for them throughout. But the fact that there's not going to be obviously not getting those draft picks that they would get in return for trading him, if it were to happen now,
right,
is a big loss. But I'm just curious what that means about the calendar and then not doing it before the draft if, in fact, it's not going to be until May.
What's his salary next year, Paul?
He's
making
$35 million base next year. So, I mean, it's further complicated. He's got a 40.4 cap hit next year. He'd leave dead money behind for sure. So it's more complicated.
Well, but I don't even know if that's an issue for Houston.
No, Houston's going to swallow what it needs to swallow.
No, right? The only issue is, to Chad's point, they're not getting draft picks in next year's draft because these legal. So here's the timeline. The legal issues will go past the NFL draft and free agency, but Houston will have moved on from him, or if they haven't, the league will put him on unpaid suspension. Based on whatever happens in these court cases. So he can be deposed beginning in February of next year if he refuses to settle, which he is saying he refuses to settle because he's innocent. So he's going to be deposed starting in February. The new league year starts March 16th, 2022. What that means is the Texans cannot trade him after today's trade deadline. They cannot trade him until that day, the first day of the league year. So go through all this.
Just to say, sometimes teams agree to deals before that date that don't become official. Like when Alex Smith got traded to Washington, it happened early in the year, then not effectively until the start of the league year. Not that anybody's going to be anxious to do it before things get settled. But that's why sometimes you see a deal happen earlier than that. It gets put in place. It doesn't happen until the start of the league.
But it will not happen in this case.
No.
He will not be traded until March 16th at the earliest, and really he's not going to be traded, as I said earlier, until after May as you go through this timeline. The civil trials can begin in May. And so after the depositions take place in early or to mid-February, that's when they can start. The trial could start as early as May. That's after the free agency period for the NFL league year of 2022.
And after the draft.
Of course, yeah. So that now leaves the Texans in a good and bad spot. And let's look at it from both factors here. It makes no sense for Miami to give up what Nick Caserio and the Texans wanted in return for Deshaun Watson, not knowing the legal ramifications and not knowing what the NFL is going to do depending on how this plays out in 2022 for Deshaun Watson. That's number one. But from the Texans' standpoint, he's either going to be placed on this exempt list, and in some case, Pac-Man Jones, for instance, is the one I referenced because I remember this year-long suspension. He was suspended without pay. Depending on the severity of this, the league could do that. So that's one thing. The other thing is if things go to a point where you learn that nothing's going to happen to Deshaun Watson, let's just use that as an example. The Texans would then be able to sit back and say, okay, we know the NFL draft rundown, we know the picks, we know that, and I'm looking at this from a March 16th standpoint. We know the order of the NFL draft, we know the teams involved, and if in this best case scenario for Houston, more teams would be involved if more teams are willing to jump in and trade for Deshaun Watson, knowing that the league's not going to do anything about this, knowing that, let's say, hypothetically, this settles and the league determines based on the information that they have that they're not going to punish Deshaun Watson severely in any manner. But aside from that, it would also clarify things for Miami. And if you believe the reports that a deal was in place except for the fact that he wouldn't settle, then Houston's getting what they want in return for Miami in that case. So Houston owes Deshaun Watson $10 million. They were going to do that whether he was on the commissioner's list this year or not. And effectively, they've put him on the commissioner's list without Goodell actually doing it by not playing him. But this is a Deshaun Watson decision of not settling out of court. And so now we get involved in the legal mess that will take place starting in February.
He's got no roster bonus, by the way, next year. So there's no new money coming to him until next regular season gets started.
It's fascinating to me. It's clear that he is saying I'm innocent throughout this whole thing, right? He's going to fight it. His innocence, proving his innocence, going to court if needed is what's most important to him, which is understandable. I also think it's understandable even if you believe you were innocent. If there were 22 people accusing you of something and your attorney came to you and said, Deshaun, you can pay $3 to $5 million right now, let's say that's a price range, $3 to $5 million, and we can settle out of court. We can all sign NDAs. We can make this thing go away.
He doesn't want an NDA.
Yeah, that's one of the stickling points here.
He wants this public.
Yes, I know he doesn't, but I'm saying if part of it was you're signing an NDA, I'm giving you the option the lawyer's giving him. You sign an NDA, they sign an NDA, we are done with this, you serve a half a season suspension, and we can go about getting you traded and making money with your new team. What's more important to the individual? I understand and respect if you're in his shoes and you believe you've done nothing wrong and you want to go to court and prove your innocence. You have every right as an American citizen to do that. I can also understand someone saying, you know what, screw it. I've got the money. I want to keep playing football. Let's pay the money. Let's get this to go away. I'll serve my time, even if I feel like I didn't do much wrong. But this is all happening at once. This storm is happening. I want to end it. I want to move on with my career. I want to sit out half a season and play somewhere else. I think the internal battle that must be going on with Deshaun Watson with that, and with his attorneys. Not that his attorneys are battling him, but this is legal advice an attorney could give you throughout this process. And I'm sure they've given him this option at some point. That part of it to me is fascinating. That he's decided to do this and in return could blow up his career, especially if it doesn't turn out the way he wants.